Now, as a best-selling LGBT women's studies children's author, I've been thinking more about the infamous Will Smith incident at the Oscars. It's been interesting, really, especially to view this story through the marginalized lens of an LGBT women's studies expert. My community is so often ignored in these conversations, no matter how many best-selling books we write. So over the past day or so, a consensus has emerged on the left, at least among the race hustlers and other members of its wokest factions. The settled narrative is that Will Smith, as a black man, ostensibly in defense of a black woman's feelings, is entitled to lash out as violently as he wants, in whatever context he wants. That seems to be the sentiment. Now, I think a few viral tweets might summarize things for us. This one, with 134,000 likes, says, Chris Rock's one joke was rooted in misogynoir, texturism, and ableism. Degrading a black woman in a room full of her peers on live TV. The fact that y'all don't see that as violent is beyond me. Yes, who has not flown into a violent rage because of texturism? Everyone in my life knows that texturism, much less texturism mixed with misogynoir, is my biggest pet peeve. When I hear texturism, they can hear me shouting from the other room. Is that texturism? Are you guys doing texturism in there? Especially as a women's studies expert. They know, don't bring that mess around me. So I can understand that, but still. Also, someone in media named Shay Booley concurred, posting, black emotions scare white people. That's quite clear. Y'all shook because you're used to seeing your favorite black people wear their masks. Then a woman named Grace Randolph adds, Will Smith wins Best Actor. He is still clearly very shaken by what was said about Jada, his choice to stand up for her, and the abuse that goes on today of public figures, people of color, and more. He will surely speak on this more all week, as will others. The New York Assemblywoman by the name of, I don't know her name, but she joined other politicians like Ayanna Pressley and Jamal Bowman in claiming that Chris Rock's joke was a form of violence. She tweeted, it is violence to mock someone's health condition and vulnerability. It is violence to physically assault someone. It is violent to not take responsibility for violent actions. It is violence to allow and excuse violence. It is violence to call for violence. Yes, it's violence to excuse violence, she says as she excuses violence. Meanwhile, the media has gotten in on the action. USA Today published an article with the headline, Jada Pinkett Smith, Chris Rock, and why his hair joke was so problematic. And then Forbes asks this question in their headline, why are jokes always at the expense of black women? Now, I can answer that. Jokes are not always at the expense of black women. In fact, jokes are almost never at the expense of black women. We might reasonably say that black women are the least mocked and least joked about group in the country, perhaps even beating out trans people for that title. On the rare occasion that anyone does tell a joke about black women, or about a black woman individually, it is always another black person telling a joke. I can't remember the last time I've heard a non-black person tell a joke about a black woman, much less black women in general. On the other hand, non-white people tell jokes about white people, and especially white women, all the time. The term Karen is itself a derogatory joke about white women, which was first popularized by non-white people. So Karen is a joke that black people tell about white people. There is no synonymous joke going the other direction. It doesn't exist. What's more, I think we all know that if Chris Rock had made a joke about a white woman, I mean, he's told many jokes about white women many times for many years, but if on that particular night he had happened to joke about a white woman and her white husband strode onto the stage and slapped him across the face, we could be quite sure that there would be nobody defending him, the guy doing the slapping, that is, and he would have been arrested and charged with a hate crime before he could even get back to his seat. That's the real lesson we can take from this. And there are two others, related less to the incident itself and more to the reaction on the left to the incident. First, we see how the racial victim narrative is superimposed onto everything, regardless of the facts on the ground. It doesn't matter that this was black on black crime. Doesn't matter that the men involved had the same race, same socioeconomic status, same gender, same age, same sexual orientation. You would think, if you didn't know any better, that one rich black man slapping another rich black man at the Oscars would be an event impervious to racial tribalization. If there's any story that cannot be intersectionalized, it would be this, you might think. But you'd be wrong. The race hustlers, as we've learned time and time again, they need only for a black person to be involved. That's all the clay they need to mold the image they want to mold from it. And even if there was no black person involved, even if this was white-on-white violence, Leonardo DiCaprio slapping Tom Cruise or something like that, which would have been great, by the way, still, they could make black people the victim. Second, most importantly, we see that the left is serious when they say that words are violence. Now, of course, that statement is heavily qualified. Words insulting or joking about certain groups of people are violence. I mean, you can, of course, say whatever the hell you want about straight white people. Chris Rock could have done a 15-minute routine where he fantasized openly about rounding up all the white people in the room and burning them alive, and it would have been considered comedic brilliance. He could have actually rounded them all up and really burned them alive, and it's arguable whether he'd be in jail right now. That much is established. But words attacking or supposedly attacking or simply just criticizing or lightly mocking members of a protected class are indeed violence in the minds of a leftist. Why? Well, this is where the story ties in with everything else we're witnessing in our culture. It intersects with gender ideology, which is a topic that I explore, by the way, in my best-selling women's studies book, What is a Woman?, available now for pre-order at whatiswoman.com. For an individual in a protected class, their self-perceptions, their feelings, especially their feelings about themselves, are just as important as their physical well-being. That's the way it's seen in our culture. In fact, even more important. Remember, in the modern world, we have assumed the power to make ourselves. We are forever engaged in the never-ending process of self-creation. The most important version of yourself is not your physical self, your actual self, but the self you have constructed in your imagination. Physical violence cannot necessarily touch your imagined self, which is your most important self again, but words can, ideas can. Ideas can even kill a person's imagined self, their self-perception. And so in that sense, words are violence, the worst kind of violence. This obviously applies most to a person's so-called gender identity, but it applies to everything else that they think and feel about themselves. Jada Pinkett Smith had spoken publicly before the night of the Oscars, even recently, about how she loves her bald head. She's proud of it. She thinks it's beautiful. Now, that's obviously not true. She doesn't really think that, or else she wouldn't be so sensitive to jokes about it. I mean, if you're really proud of something and you think it's great and beautiful and you have no problem with it, and somebody tells a joke about it, it's not going to make any dent at all on you. It's just going to bounce right off you because you're confident. So she's not really confident about it as she pretends, but she wants to think that way about herself. That's the self-perception she is trying to conjure up and create and maintain. A joke obstructs that process, and so it's violence. It's violence against the version of herself she is trying to perceive. That's what they mean when they say words are violence. It's all completely insane, of course, but it's the world we're living in nonetheless. And it's good to try to understand it to the extent that we can. Hey, listen, hit the subscribe button. Do it right now. I demand it. And I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.